Just here, on the cliff top, is the site of a Bronze Age barrow. The Bronze Age people were the first farmers and lived with a lifestyle that we could easily recognise as civilization. The barrow has stood here looking out across the bay for some 4,000 years, but the sea is steadily gnawing away at the cliff, and within a mere 100 years or so, the barrow will be gone. It makes you wonder how much of our civilization will be here for any future archaeologists to see in 4,000 years' time. We'll need a strong cup of tea to ponder that question. Let's go in and put the kettle on. Hello, I'm Peter John Cooper. As a magnificent treat for you, today's story will be read by my old friend and excellent actor, Trisha Lewis. Over to you, Trisha.
The Archaeologist. Breakfast, Lily. She stared bleakly at the things laid out on the table. She didn't feel hungry. Or rather, she did, but all this stuff made her feel slightly nauseous. Yes, it all looked as it should, as she thought it should. Bacon, eggs, beans, hash browns. A side plate with a croissant she'd found at the back of the steadily thawing freezer. Even a tiny pot that said British strawberry jam on the label. For anyone who could understand, it implied hotel breakfast. Thus, hotel. Thus, some form of civilization. If a sleaze pit like this could ever have been referred to as civilization. She grimaced. Enjoy. She found a tray and began packing things neatly onto it. It didn't really need the food. That would be gone in a couple of weeks. The worms and bacteria would polish the plates and cutlery, but she was methodical and she wanted to do the thing as it should be done. Leave as many clues as she could. During her first year at university, she had attended a rather dry lecture about identifying ancient foodstuffs from microscopic starch grains. She had forgotten most of the technicalities, but as far as she could recall, these could remain embedded in tiny scratches in the surface of bowls and pots for thousands of years. It was a complicated process. But she would leave what evidence she could. It's down to you, Lil. Certainly, by the thumping music and the sound of shrill laughter and screams from the upstairs bedrooms, any sense of actual civilization had already evaporated. She shouldered the kitchen door open and carried the tray out to where she had made the excavation. She had chosen the site in the ragged, rubbish-strewn copse beyond the hotel car park. She had tried to go as deep as she could to be out of the way of foxes' earths and badgers' sets. At least, she assumed there would still be foxes and badgers, if nothing else. She had chosen this spot after a brief check on OS maps and a glance at the town guide. Apparently there had been continuous habitation here for several centuries, and reputedly, with the demolition of a modest Victorian terrace, they had found older bones and, some said, Bronze Age artefacts. She wished she had time. Time to indulge in a proper investigation with the old crowd. Brian and Moira and Mike and Kev, to cut through the old brickwork foundations and through those layers beneath as though slicing a Neapolitan ice cream. There was that sinking feeling again. Sorry, Lil. Not like me at all. Get a grip. Job to do. She laid the tray down reverently and began placing the objects into the trench. It was her version of a Saxon warrior's grave, the objects placed with care and reverence. And meaning. Plate, knife, fork and spoon, side plate, cereal bowl. What's it to be, Lil? Rice Krispies or Cocoa Pops? She had considered the cereal for a long time and in the end had gone for Cocoa Pops. In the pubs where they had assembled after a day's work, glad to be out of the weather, they had bantered about who had found the most significant artefact. And there was that time she had nearly come to blows with Brian about some more abstruse archaeological topic. Probably the question of whether, when farming had begun the whole adventure of civilization, what was the trigger of it all? Was it einkorn, emmer wheat, or rice? And now, ironically, she was the only person who knew that whatever the first cereal was, the last was to be Cocoa Pops. Up yours, Brian! She wondered whether it would ever be possible for Lily to fathom the difference between Cocoa Pops and Rice Krispies. Does it even bleeding matter? In the trench, she worked methodically with almost religious care. She was calling upon every skill and technique she had picked up over her career and was literally reversing them. This should mean something, not just rubbish tipped into a pit. She wanted someone to realise that this was important, that they should stop here and think. She wanted to lead them into a world of calculation. Here were data. I'm doing the best I can here, Lil. Now please, please, please use your brain. Work out what it all means. In previous enactments, this would have been the final acts of grief, the public ceremonies of a wife or mother, laying a warrior's sword at his side with kisses and tears. For once she felt relieved that she had no family. Mother dead, father disappeared years ago. Bastard. No significant other, not to speak of. Another bastard. And for once, thankfully, no kids. There had been times when that emptiness had gnawed at her in the depths of the night, when she had felt a deep, overwhelming wave of loneliness. She idly wondered whether Lily, this future unknown woman, was the daughter she had never known. But now she was glad to be alone and detached. No kisses, no tears. She fetched a bag of clean sand from the boot of her car, which she poured carefully over her handiwork before backfilling with garden soil. She stood back and looked at the spot. This nowhere remarkable. None of the sites she had chosen were, but she hoped that down the long, echoing corridor of time, maybe... I'm doing this for you, Lily, I think. Standing there as though at a grave, she felt as though she ought to say a prayer, but she knew not what to pray for. Goodbye. This was to be her last burial, if only because there was no more fuel for the car. For the last few weeks she had travelled as far as she could across the south, finding sites which she thought might be suitable. Each site she had dedicated to some future archaeologist. Patsy, Kitty, Rona, and here Lily. Entirely random, spurious names plucked out of thin air, meaningless, unless one or other of them found the impetus, as she had, to dig, to explore, to find out. While she still had the luxury of imagination, she pictured it as her funeral chariot, carrying her towards the setting sun. She glanced in the driver's mirror and made a face. "Come on, girl, buck up." The car would stand here for a few years before it disappeared into the undergrowth. There would be no other clues. She didn't have the means or resources to actually bury a car, however much it meant to her. There would be no Sutton Hoo discovery for this warrior's conveyance. There may be a few abstract clumps of rust and some meaningless strips of plastic, but the car itself would be gone. Patsy, Kitty, Rona and Lily, if there were to be any. Patsy, Kitty, Rona and Lily might just find something to begin them wondering about what had gone before. She smiled wryly at herself and fumbled in the glove box where she found a lipstick. She wrote on the windscreen. It was her final message, written in as simple a code as she could think of. It said, "I was here."
Thank you for listening to that story today. I hope we can get Trisha and other actors to read some more in the future. If, of course, there is a future.